It's your boy Crypto Millie back with another one on Superstar Saturday. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about crypto.com, token burns unburn, the crypto.com unburn, right? We're going to be going over trust scarcity and the crow controversy, how token burns normally work, right? And contrary to many people's beliefs, what's actually happening with this crow mint. So it's not actually an unburn. There's been a lot of misinformation. They're actually re-minting tokens, and we're going to be talking about all of this. So if you like these videos on crypto.com, make sure that you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and keep your favorite crypto and door-to-door entrepreneur inside the algorithms. Now let's take a look at crypto.com's chart, because a lot of people thought that I was being moon boyish to crypto.com, and I just frankly wasn't. I was just telling you guys I operate utilizing crypto.com as an exchange, aka i.e. a bank. Now I think most of the FUD is coming from the token aspect, as there is a difference between Cronos chain as an ecosystem and crypto.com as an exchange. So I think we got to focus on that first. A lot of people don't know that there's actually a difference there. And for the last 6 months, it seems like Chris has been working the distance or create distance between the chain and actual exchange, right? Because the chain is where things can get built on, developers can come build, token creation happens, even meme coins, and then exchange is like, everything they're doing with the exchange as far as like actually buying crypto, helping clients and consumers with self custody. Also, they have these crazy partnerships with, like, this is the crypto.com arena. If you do not know, LeBron James plays at this arena, Luka Doncic plays at this arena, and then plethora of different partnerships. But most importantly, licenses here, right? These are the licenses in multiple different countries that crypto.com has been able to attain. Now, many people are starting to assume that crypto.com is kind of like underwater or illiquid, and this is the reason that they needed to remint these tokens. As you can see, everything that they've been doing for the last a year or 2 years hasn't really been reflecting in the price, and we're trying to figure out, where does the utility of Crow actually stand as far as the token, right? Does the success of the exchange or the success of everything they've been doing, will it truly affect the token from a price standpoint? And it hasn't. And now with this new news that they are reminting tokens, right? They're reminting, token. If you don't know, in 2021, there was a huge burn with crypto.com. So it kind of worked like this, right? So you need, first and foremost, we need to understand the token burns and the crow controversy, how token burns typically work, and why crow unburn is making waves. Tokens are sent to a burn address normally with no private key, right? Similar to why you see I have this picture up, right? It's kind of like throwing your wallet in the ocean and no one can ever receive it, right? This is goes hand in hand with the ETH EIP 1559 burns, right? Burn wallet, and then Binance has a burn wallet that they were doing quarterly burns, where a lot of people started to utilize this wallet in the crypto space. If you got a meme coin and you want to create scarcity and stuff for your tokens, you can send it to these dead addresses and they're burned forever. Now there's speculation where people are wondering, are these tokens gone, truly gone forever? Because burn address means there's no private key and it's supposed to be inaccessible. So this actually makes things worse for people who look at these burns and really put a lot into it. So how burns normally work: tokens are sent to a burn address with no private key, reduces circulating supply permanently, common in many ecosystems to increase scarcity and value. Ethereum's EIP 1559 and BNB's quarterly burns is just an example. So I've done a case study here on the crow burn. Apparently, crypto.com burnt 70 billion crow, 70% of the supply ahead of Cronos mainnet. 59.6 were sent to a dead address on February 20th, 2021. 10.4 billion were locked and burnt monthly, which we've been seeing, and then the max supply became 30 billion, with 27.3 billion circulating today. Now there's been a lot of controversy here about the unburning, but it's not really a unburn, right? As of March 2025, Cronos Lab proposed minting 70 billion new crow, right? And there's been a lot of speculation on why. Apparently, they're working to create this strategic reserve. Their aim is to fund initiatives like a crow ETF and global expansion. What we did see Chris and Trump kind of like having the conversations. We don't know what happened with these conversations, and maybe this conversation was reason why they decided to mint. So apparently, Crow would mainnet or ecosystem, right, allows them to mint new tokens, right? So they're not literally unburning tokens; they're just minting new tokens. And you're probably wondering, like, Millie, how is this even possible, right? I thought most of the tokens was in supply. Well, their ecosystem is a little different from ETH and in BNB. You understand, Crow is its own ecosystem, its own casino, its own platform, right? It's not a ERC20 token. It's not a BNB or a Binance Smart Chain BEB token, right? It's not a Solana, a Sol token, right? It's a Crow. It's Crow. It's Crow's own personal tech, right? So Cronos itself, the chain, uses Cosmos SDK, allowing tokenomic changes. So these are some of the things that when you do research on a token, you do research on this aspect and you understand the risk. So for anybody that's complaining right now about Crow and what they're doing, understand that, and I'm speaking to myself, right? Maybe we didn't do enough due diligence and research, right? Because at the end of the day, if we know Cronos uses Cosmos SDK, well, they can always manipulate the supply, right? And if you bought Crow and you did not know this, well, that's something that you should have done as far as due diligence and understanding. And if you do know this, understand that you hit the buy button and chose to buy despite understanding that governance proposals can authorize new minting of tokens within this ecosystem. Also, smart contracts can create a new supply even if burns are permanent. So again, this wasn't a unburn, right? This was just them utilizing their ecosystem and Cosmos SDK tools to mint more tokens. So they minted 70 billion new Crow tokens. The issue here is we don't know the end game, right? Why they say ETF, strategic reserve, but it's like very, very bland. There's been a community backlash, feels like betrayal, right? A lot of people, when they hear the word burn, they think it'll never come back. Also, there's been a conflict of interest. So March 3rd, 87% of the early voters opposed no, right? They voted against this, right? But now there's been a critics are starting to say, well, crypto.com is centralized, right? Because crypto.com itself allegedly controls most of the major validators. So they were able to come in and pretty much what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like strong arm this vote because they control the major validators. So if you ever did any type of voting, I remember back in the day we used to talk about this with the Terra Luna Classic validators, and frankly, how you get it, right? The validators on Terra Luna Classic, and how they manipulate, right? Because the ones who hold the most supply can get the most votes, right? Pretty much how it works. So it says why burn wallets must be inaccessible. So this is why when a token says they're doing a burn, they need to keep it a burn, right? Because this ensures trust, immutability, and supply control. Burn tokens should be irretrievable. Reversing burns undermines confidence in tokenomics, and this is why you're starting to see a lot of people, even some of the top YouTubers, pretty upset here and talking negatively about Crow and the unburn, right? No, it's not an unburn though. It's basically they're utilizing SDK tools to remint, right? And it is what it is at this point. But Chris is doing a AMA on the 25th. So it's important to note, guys, that before we just come up with all type of rumors, we let the man speak and kind of understand what's going on. So Cosmo SDK allows minting via smart contracts. Centralized voting power enables an override of community will. And that's the reason why this kind of feels wrong. Burn reversals are rare and controversial, sets dangerous precedent for other projects, could damage trust in all token burns across all ecosystems. And a lot of people are starting to now question burns, and we don't need that, right? Burn wallet should remain inaccessible. Minting new exploits government, not security loopholes. So I want to make that clear. Any minting doesn't hurt the security of crypto.com, but it does exploit governance, meaning that if crypto.com does have massive pull on these validators, then they can kind of like get the votes to sway in their way. Ethical and reputational questions remain, a cautionary tale of the decentralized trust. On top of that, Chris himself has kind of like this shaky past with businesses. And then when you think about that, people kind of like go into like, well, he's been kind of, you know, suspect before with his other businesses. Maybe, you know, that lack of integrity, honesty, transparency, character, whatever is flowing into his platform. Now, I'm not willing to go that far because, again, I've shown you guys countless proof here of some of the things they've been able to do. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's very hard to be able to get predicting a prediction market for sports on a crypto.com exchange. So now you can predict sports events through trading, even across the US. CFTC regulated derivatives project, trade with USD, or even convert your crypto to bet on sports. There's no exchange that's actually doing this, right? So you got to think about some of the things that are going on and people question. So crypto.com has indeed gone big on marketing. So this is the juicy part of the video. Hopefully you guys hear. So this is some of the things that they spent on and why people are kind of questioning this mint of 70 billion tokens, right? So they spent 700 million on 20 years of crypto.com arena, formerly known as Staples Center. That's 35 million annually. Celebrity endorsement deals with Matt Damon, Eminem, and others. Reportedly cost millions to produce and air. Sports sponsorships, they got partnerships with the US UFC, another 175 million over 10 years. Formula One, 100 plus million. FIFA and teams like the Philadelphia 76ers and Paris Saint-Germain, they likely run into hundreds of millions combined. So the marketing is, I mean, come on. Crypto.com operates in dozens of countries, requiring compliance with regulations. Think licenses in the US, EU, Singapore, Dubai. I've showed you guys. Rough ballpark, they're likely spending 100 to 200 million yearly on marketing and licensing. Possibly more during peak campaign years like 21, 2022. That's a hefty burn rate for a company whose revenue comes primarily from trading fees, card programs, and staking streams, which fluctuate with market conditions. So again, this kind of like really makes the people who are staking kind of like, man, I'm caught up into this, like paying for these deals. And hopefully we're hopeful that this marketing turns into demand for the actual Crow token and not only the Crow exchange. Because if the market only creates demand for the exchange, then that only makes money for crypto.com, right? Because through revenue, if it doesn't boost the price of the token, now people are kind of intrigued of like, why do we have the token, or why am I holding this token, or what will we need for this actually to affect the token and pump the token. This is if crypto.com were eternally illiquid, struggling to cover operational costs, they might look to their native token Crow as a lifeline. Reissuing 70 billion Crow could in theory let them sell tokens, dump portions of reissue Crow into the market over 5 to 10 years vesting period, collateralize user tokens as a collateral for loans or liquidity pools, incentivize, allocate them to marketing campaign partnerships or user rewards without dipping into fiat reserves. At 7 cents per Crow, those 70 billion tokens are worth 4.9 billion fully diluted. So this is worth $5 billion, and apparently it's supposed to go to the strategic reserve for Crow, right? The crypto, a Crow ETF, right? This is what they're putting together. But a lot of people are speculating that they're underwater as far as their marketing and what it takes to actually run this platform, and they need liquid cash in there really to sell tokens, to dump portions of reissue Crow into the market to make sure these things are paid for. The official pitch for the reissuance was the strategic reserve, right? And AI-driven initiatives. They frame this remint as a long-term vision, not a short-term cash grab. But my theory suggests an unspoken motive. They're strapped for liquidity after overextending on branding and regulatory compliance. Evidence for this is circumstantial but not plausible, right? So crypto winters like 2022 hit exchanges hard, trading volumes tank, and crypto.com laid off 20% of the staff in 2023. Big spending during the 2021 bull run might have left them over leveraged. Then we got to talk about the centralized control. The vote passed with 62% approval, despite early community opposition, which was apparently 87%. This sparked rumors that crypto.com's alleged 80% voting power suggests they forced it through, hinting at urgency, right? So This is why they say it's centralized. Basically, they have the most money in the validator, so they can control a big portion of the votes. And again, no transparency. They haven't detailed exact plans for reserve bond, vague, but we just got to trust Chris, right? Chris has been pretty stand up guy since then. So I'm not willing to come up here and say what I think he's thinking. We'll have to find out how he feels about this in AMA. And hopefully y'all share this video so that crofam can see this. On the flip side, remember the proof of reserves debacle. Crypto.com published a Merkle tree audit in 2022 via Mars is claiming one-in-one backing for customers' funds. They've avoided FTX-style implosions, suggesting decent liquidity then, but there has not been an update since then, post-2025. So this was like almost 3 years ago. Man, wow. Time moves fast. Their Visa card program tied to Crow staking and exchange fees likely generate cash. A bull market in 2025 could ease pressure on the needed token still. So understand, if we get bullish again, right, we go into QE or maybe stop QT, liquidity rushes in, Crow pumps, and a lot of people start staking Crow. This can offset that selling pressure that they may need to put out there to pay for some of these things. But just pay attention to the optic risk here, which is reissuing burn tokens to fund operations with tank trust. Why not issue debt or equity instead? The ETF angle suggests they're chasing institution credibility, right? They're trying to be like the other tokens, the Cardanos. They're trying to be looked at as this the exchange token of the crypto reserves, which is fair because you look across, I mean, Coinbase doesn't have a token, right? There was the most of the tokens that were listed were like layer ones, but there was no like premier exchange that seemed to have gotten the graces of Trump besides WLF, right? And name dropped here within this crypto reserve. So it looks like they're trying to put themselves out there and as a respected top 50 token that should be looked as and respected as a Cardano, as an XRP, et cetera, right? The critical take here is reminting to sustain marketing due to internal liquidity issues, a sharp hypothesis, but it's not fully provable without their books, guys. So we can't prove none of this. Chris is going to speak on the 25th. Let's see what he says. The 5 to 6 billion valuation of Crow dwarfs their annual marketing spending, implying it's overkill for that alone, right? We just talked about what 100, 200 million a year. What do they need 5 billion for? So you got to think about that. Maybe they're not underwater. Maybe this is for an ETF. Unless they're hiding bigger losses or planning a massive expansion, ETF, US dominance, the centralized push and lack of clarity fueled suspicion, but their public narrative leans towards ambition, not survival. So everything that we've been seeing is ambition. The licenses, the marketing, the new aspects to their exchange, right? They're basically becoming the Robin Hood of crypto, right? The Robin Hood has everything, right? The Coinbase, right? They're like the Coinbase of actual crypto because Coinbase doesn't have a coin. So with that being said, I think that we're overreacting and we need to just realistically wait and see what Chris has to say. Without hard financials, we're left guessing. But the optics of reversing a permanent burn scream either genius or desperation. If they start dumping Crow soon, our liquidity theory will gain legs. But for now, I think we just need to chill and kind of wait to see what happens in this AMA and what Chris has to say. So, guys, it's not an unburn. They just reminted more tokens, right? Right. It's part of their ecosystem. If you do research on the SDK Cosmo tools, you can see how you can pretty much manipulate and change tokenomics, right? So they didn't pull out the ledger from under the ocean and say, hey, let's put these tokens back in regular. They literally just minted new tokens, and we don't know what this is for. It's a 5-year, 10-year vesting plans. They say it's for a strategic reserve, U.S. expansion, but no one truly knows. We're just assuming, and we got to stop always assuming the worst, guys. We got to stop doing that, man. Like, these are businesses, and you need a leader that sometimes has to make a hard business decision. We got to stop assuming that everything is always bad. Maybe this is for the good of Crow in the ecosystem, in the platform. We always just focus on things. I'm not here I'm not moon boy and crow, right? I think they should have just never called it a burn and just called it a lockup. It would have been way more better from a trust standpoint if they would say, hey, this is a lockup. We're locking it for 2 years just to see what happens, right? And if we need these tokens, we'll make them accessible. If not, they'll continue to be locked or we'll burn them forever. Anywho, y'all let me know what y'all think about crypto.com and what's going on with this whole burn and remint, not unburn. Guys, I would love to know everybody's opinion. This is your boy Crypto Millie. I'll see you the next one.